the Catholic Morning Show.
Wonderful to be with you here this morning. Hope that you're getting around good and well. It's a rainy and a little bit dreary, but not in the sort of middle of January way, more like the middle of April. This is the rain that's going to have everything be bright and shiny and new. Hope everybody who had any of that severe weather was able to avoid anything too catastrophic. Hope that things are turning around and getting ready to be wonderful this weekend as we hit the middle of the week. It is 17 minutes after the hour. I'm here with Alexia Baker, Ayden Pugh, and Brady Grimm. All of us happy you're listening here on Iowa Catholic Radio. On the second half of the show, we'll speak with Emily Geminet like we do every month. But right now, let's turn to our first guest of the day. Peter Giersch is currently serving as founder and CEO of the Giersch Group, a varied career in business, academia, and the arts. His new book, Talking of Michelangelo, Death, Judgment, Heaven, and Hell in the Burgundy Region. Peter, thank you for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Well, thanks for having me, Bo. It's great to be here.
It is wonderful indeed. Now, Peter, one of the sort of signal ways that a lot of the people advocating and marketing your book point out, death, judgment, heaven, and hell, of course, are the four last things and quite heavy things to consider and talk about. But they talk about the sort of whimsical, humorous nature of this book and the fact that it's a travel memoir. So for the listeners, how do we bridge that you're talking about death, judgment, heaven, and hell, but you're having a good time doing it?
Well, because I'm in France, you've probably heard that phrase, to be happy is God in France, because God couldn't be any happier unless he was in France. No, but honestly, I think it goes a lot to my writing voice, my writing style. I don't know if you're old enough to remember The Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have to read that in high school. Remember that?
Oh, of course.
And when I read that book in high school, it was such a conversational style of writing. I thought I could do that, and that really heavily influenced my writing style. So, but then I read Mere Christianity in college, and I thought, okay, that is really how I'd much rather write. So I kind of consider this kind of a mixture. You've got The Catcher in the Rye's very conversational style, but then you've got, C.S. Lewis always wrestling with these tough questions about our faith. So that's kind of how I put it together.
Well, the wonderful thing about, of course, how we walk through, the faith is each faith journey is particular and specific, but there's also sort of ways in which there's themes and tropes that run through all of human life. So in one way, right, your book is something that is a pattern in certain memoirs, right? Like you go to do one thing and something else occurs, but the way that you talk about it in this book, that it was very pivotal for you, that this sort of going to do one thing and expecting something that turned out to be something else was very important in your life. So if you don't mind sharing that general kernel to the readers about this book.
Yeah, for me, this is one of those times in my life when God sort of brought me up short, and when I went to this monastery in France for a retreat, I interacted with these monks who were really, really holy men and serious about their faith. And, the setting and everything about it, it just made, and these monks, they took heaven and hell, they took hell for sure and mortal sin very seriously, and they weren't afraid to preach about it. And it was, like I said, it sort of brought me up short. Like, wait a minute, we hear so much about God's mercy, and that's great. I love Faustina's diary and all that. But in Faustina's diary, if you know what I'm talking about with the Divine Mercy, she talks about hell. So does Jesus in there, by the way. So we can get really caught up on God's mercy, but hell is real too, and that's what these guys were talking about. That kind of got me. It's kind of got me like to really pause, really reflect, and really think hard about the four last things.
So one of the promotional material talks about how your book quotes and refers to many sources, so Lewis, Tolkien, and Milton, but also Fraser, Elvis, Jimi Hendrix, and the Eagles. They missed the most obvious one, which is one of your chapters is Piper at the Gates of Dawn, so a good Pink Floyd reference.
Yeah, you caught that.
Yeah.
Good for you. All right.
So when you when you go about this, right, talking about these four serious things, but blending both ancient sources with things that come about in more modern culture, what was it about your memoir and being able to reflect on your life where that sort of intermixture, that interweaving, was able to make the points that you were hoping to make?
Well, I think there's two reasons. One is I just think it's more fun to find parallels to what God is doing in pop culture than, say, in the religious stories we've heard a million times. So, for example, there's a chapter in there where I talk about how God can dupe you, God can trick you into things. And we all know that in Jeremiah says,
right,
you duped me, God, and I let myself be duped. Now, I could have used that to make my point, but there's this Fraser episode where he tries to make a deal with God. Fraser tries to make a deal with God, and of course God gets the better end of the deal, and Fraser looks up to heaven and says, "Well played, God." It's just more fun for me to reference Fraser than, to go back to Jeremiah, because we've heard that a million times. But there's another reason that I think is maybe more theological or more spiritual about why there's so many pop cultural references in here. There's that beautiful phrase, of course, in the New Testament that says, in Him we live and move and have our being, right?
Right.
So in God we live and move and have our being, and we all know that's true. We wouldn't exist without God. But if you look practically, in a real practical sense, at where do we live and move and have our being? It's in the culture. It's in Fraser. It's in Led Zeppelin. It's in whatever, not everybody does the things I do, but it's in all this different stuff that you interact with every day. That's where God is. And so I love finding God there and finding the same lessons in the pop culture around me that you can find in the Bible, because you can't get away from it. God is everywhere.
So, yes, and one of the ways you blend this is, again, sorry to pay more attention to the table of contents, but I'm really enjoying how you did this. So this is a sort of method of table of contents where, everybody likes the sort of pithy title for the chapter, but then a more European style is to then provide a paragraph about what's going on. So one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, it's like the old Moby Dick thing.
Yes.
The chapter in which
yes,
Ishmael meets the whale, kind of thing.
So again, one of my favorite ones is part 2, chapter 3, Life is One Big Want, in which the author meets Father Andre and learns that it was God's will that the author could not play golf on his one free day before the start of the retreat, and also wherein the author attends the first conference of the retreat and learns that holiness requires un grand desire. So when it comes to something like this, right, about, on one hand, learning that providence thwarted a golf game, but on the other hand, that this opens up to a true theological insight, I would think that is the benefit of memoir, right? Being willing to sort of see our lives as typological possibilities to share with others.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that people write. I ask myself, who writes memoirs? Because I had to think about how I was going to explain this. And I'm having wonderful conversations with people like you. And I thought, well, who writes memoirs? And I think there's three types of people who write memoirs. There's politicians who want to get their story out there. And then there's famous people who were in the room where it happened, so to speak.
Yep.
But then there's survivors, right? People who've been through something. And sorry, I'm in New York, and I don't know if you can hear the sirens outside.
Yep.
But there's a window. Okay, so there's people who survived, right? They're survivors. And when I look back at this retreat experience, I feel like I survived organized religion, so to speak. So many people are like, I'm spiritual but not religious. And what they basically mean is, I like God, but I don't like rules.
Right.
And I came face to face with some really tough questions about God's rules, about death, judgment, heaven, and hell, and all that stuff. And I survived. And so, I think in that sense, this is a memoir about how to wrestle with the stuff you don't like about the Catholic faith, So.
And you're also not announcing you're running for office here right now. No,
No,
yeah. No.
I'm as far from a politician as you're ever going to get, and you'll see that in the book.
Well, and as we're getting to the end here of the interview, for people who are intrigued and like, the style sounds great, the willingness to see that sort of interplay between quote unquote normal life and profound spiritual truths, what would be one of the things you want to leave the listeners with about why this is the book for them and why maybe something like this is absolutely perfect here in the Easter season to pick up?
Yeah, well, I think for the summertime, because I'd say the two things that I'm hearing the most about people who read the book is, one, it's a good read, it's a fun read, it's an easy read. It's not something you got to slog through to try to, you don't have to read it standing up, so you don't fall asleep. I mean, it's a good, fun read, so that makes it kind of a good summer book. But the other thing I'm hearing, which is really touching, is one of the interviewers, guys like you, said, the book made me go back to confession. Another person said, boy, this book really made me ponder things. That was actually Eric Metaxas, a famous author that, whose endorsement is on the book. He said, I read it again because he interviewed me yesterday, and he said, this really made me think, and so I think that and then someone else said, wow, the book stuck with me. So I think if you want a fun read that's also got some teeth to it, it's also got some meat in it, I think that you'll find it here. Or so everybody else seems to think.
Well, the reviews say and with the conversation we have, I think, bears the point out that to be able to mix levity and insights into practical life, but showing how the deep spiritual truths are incarnate in those day-to-day things. This would be the book for people to check out. Talking of Michelangelo, Death, Judgment, Heaven and Hell in the Burgundy Region is out by Sophia Press. The author is Peter Giersch, and we're very thankful he came on the Catholic Morning Show. Peter, thank you for coming by.
My pleasure, Bo. Thanks so much for having me.
Listen to the Catholic Morning Show weekdays at 7 a.m. Central on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, iowacatholicradio.com, or the Iowa Catholic Radio app.